We're going to do one of the problems, number 3 in the homework problems in Chapter 3. The gains from trade. Now this one, I won't say it's a hard problem, but it's a very tedious problem. Now here's the thing. You have got to get out a piece of paper and write stuff down. You cannot do this just looking at the problem here in Cengage, in MindTap. You've got to get out paper and keep track of stuff. This is a problem of organization more than it is anything else. It's just keeping everything straight. Okay, and having some patience. This is not a problem that goes quickly, all right? So, this is the table given to us. There are different versions of the problem, but this is what I see. Okay, it says consider two neighboring island countries called Felicidad and Contente. They each have 4 million labor hours available per month that they can use to produce jeans, rye, or a combination of both. The following table shows the amount of jeans or rye that can be produced using 1 hour of labor. Okay, so this is what they give us. You see here that Felicidad in 1 hour can produce 5 jeans or 20 rye. Contente can produce 8 jeans in an hour or 16 rye. Now it goes on to say that, well, I'll just read it, then we'll calculate it. Now it actually gives us these numbers, but I'm going to show you where we get them in case you run into a problem where they don't give it to you. Okay, it says initially suppose Contente uses 1 million hours of labor per month to produce jeans and 3 million hours per month to produce rye. Okay, let's stop right there. Contente uses 1 million, and that equals 8 million, right? So they're going to allocate their labor. They have 4 million hours. They're going to allocate 1 million of them producing jeans, which means they can produce 8 million jeans. And then it says I guess the other 3 obviously are going towards rye. It tells us that. So 3 million, put a little m for million, and that gives us 48 million rye. That Contente. And like I said, it gives us that. It gives us these numbers. That's how we get them. And Felicidad uses 3 million hours of labor per month. This is per month now. So to produce jeans, and that is 15 million jeans. And therefore they're using their other million hours, and again it tells us, but if they have 4 million hours and they've used 3 in jeans, that means there's only 1 left, and that gives them 20 million jeans. Or, I'm sorry, rye. Rye. Okay, rye. And that's why you have to write stuff down. Okay, right there is why you have to write it down. Now, this is going to become useful later. Let's just make a note of how many jeans there are in the world. Okay, these countries are the whole world, let's say. And, well, let's put that, make these. So, 15 million plus 8 million is 23 million jeans. That's the world of jeans right there. And 20 million plus 48 million is 68 million rye. Okay, now those numbers are going to come in handy later, but that's the situation right now. Okay, it's good to just kind of summarize everything you can know. That's how many genes there are in the world, and that's how many rye there are in the world, right there. That's what's currently happening without trade. Okay, they are simply allocating some of their resources to each good, and this is how much is being produced. This is how many genes. That's how much rye. Okay, let's go on. Now it wants to know the opportunity cost of one pair of genes. Okay. Well, let's do this way. Felicidad. Let's draw a little production possibilities curve. We can put genes on this axis, rye on this axis. Now, Felicidad, they can produce 5 or what the world happened there? Oh, there we go. They can produce 5 genes or 20 rye. Okay, so let's plug in those points. Five genes or 20 rye, right? Those are the two. That's what they can do. They can, if they put everything into genes, it's they can produce 5. Everything in rye, they can produce 20. Okay, that's per hour of labor. But they've got 4 million hours. Now, this here tells us what they are producing. That's where they've chosen to produce. This is where they've chosen to allocate their labor. But as far as production possibilities, per hour, it's this or this. And there's our production possibilities curve. So, one gene, well, let's see. What we want to know the opportunity cost of one gene. So we want the genes to be in the denominator. So change in rye over change in genes. Okay, let's say we're sitting here producing 0 genes, and we want to go up to 5. How are we going to go from 0 to 5 genes? Well, we're going to have to go from 20 down to 0, rye. So, 5 genes. If we increase genes by 5, we're going to have to decrease rye by 20. So, what that tells us is that 5 genes cost 20 rye. Well, we don't want to know what 5 genes cost. We want to know what 1 gene costs, the opportunity cost of 1 gene. So we just divide through. Minus 20 divided by 5 equals, well, we always put it, well, any number we put, any number has a 1 under it, right? We usually don't put it there, but 20 divided by 5 is 4. Or minus 20 divided by 5 is minus 4. And we put the 1 under there, and that tells us 1 genes cost 4 rye. Okay, let's do the same thing for contente. Genes on that axis, rye on that axis. And their situation is that here's contente right here. They can produce 8 genes or 16 rye. So let's plug that in. 8 genes or 16 rye. There's their production possibilities. And that's change in rye. We put the genes again, denominator, because we want to know what 1 genes costs. The denominator always goes to 1. So there we are. Well, if we go from 0 genes to 8 genes, that's going to be an increase of genes of 8. And if we do that, it therefore is required to go from 16 down to 0, minus 16. So we know what 8 genes cost, right? We don't want to know what 8 genes cost. We want to know what 1 genes cost. So negative 16 divided by 8 equals minus 2. So 1 gene costs 2 rye in Contente. So who has the comparative advantage in the production of genes? Well, it appears that Contente does, because 1 genes only costs them 2 rye, whereas in Felicidad, 1 gene costs 4 rye. So I'm going to circle just to keep track, so I remember that it is Contente who has the comparative advantage in genes. Okay, let's move this up a bit. Well, there we go. Whoops. Now, the question asks for who has the comparative advantage in rye. Well, this time we're going to put we're going to put rye in the denominator. Change in genes over change in rye. And we're gonna cut to the chase here. Remember, these are reciprocals of each other, okay? We've got this right here. All we have to do is take the reciprocal of that. So negative 4 over 1 is the reciprocal is 1 over 4. So 1/4 equals 0.25. There we go. 1 rye costs 0.25 genes. Do the same thing over here with Contente. And negative 2 over 1. The reciprocal of that is 1/2 equals 0.5. And so we know that 1 rye costs 0.5 genes. So, who's the low-cost producer of rye? Who has the lowest opportunity cost? Well, it looks like it's Felicidad. And therefore, let's circle that just so I can remember. There. Now, they get this great idea to trade. Before they weren't trading. Now they're going to specialize in the area of their comparative advantage. Okay? So, they specialize. That means Felicidad is going to put all 4 million hours into rye production. Contente is going to put all 4 million hours into genes production and not produce anything but what they have a comparative advantage in. So we can look at this here and multiply it by 4. This here and multiply it by 4 to see what they're going to produce. And, okay, I can't get that back. Well, that's okay. We've got the information here. Well, I was going to say we can put it in the original table that they give us in the problem. It's there too. Okay. So, let's see. Contente. Whoops. Contente will produce 8 genes times 4 million hours. Okay. So they're going to be pumping out 32 million genes. Felicidad will produce, okay, all rye. That's what they've got a comparative advantage in. So they're going to produce their 20 rye times 4 million hours of labor, and that's 80 million rye. Okay, so we know they're going to specialize. We know how much they're each producing. Now it tells us, it says, suppose that the, yeah, we got the answers to the 32 and the 80. Okay, that's a question, actually. You know, they ask us, these are, you know, well, they want us to type in those numbers as you go through this question. So they want to know what each country will specialize in, who has the comparative advantage, and therefore who specializes in what, and then how much, therefore, are they each producing. Okay, now it says, suppose that the country that produces genes, well, the country that produces genes is Contente, but they don't want to give that away. They want us to figure that out. Suppose that the country that produces genes trades 18 million pairs of genes to the other country in exchange for 54 million bushels of rye. Okay. So, in other words, let's figure out what each one is going to be consuming. We know what each one is going to be producing. Let's look at consumption. Okay. So, let's start with Felicidad. Now, they are the gene producer. Okay. No, sorry. That's why you got to write it down. Because I already forgot. Who produces the genes. All right. Let's start with Contente. No, we already wrote down Felicidad. Okay. No, I want to do it the way the problem asks. Sorry about that. Let's, don't want to make it more confusing unnecessarily. Well, this is really working out. Okay. I told you this was tedious. This is you gotta, you know, really be ready for some long and painful sessions in this thing. Okay, so let's go with Contente. Okay, Contente produces 32 million genes. Okay, and they're trading away 18. Therefore, they are consuming 32 minus 18, right? So they are going to end up with 14 genes. And it says that they're trading away those 18 for 54 rye. So that's what they're consuming. 14 genes and 54 rye. How about Felicidad? Remember that Felicidad, up here, they're producing 80 rye. And they're going to, they're not producing any genes. So they are importing all their genes, and so therefore they are they're the ones getting the genes, so they're going to be consuming 18 genes that they imported from Contente. And they traded away 54 rye, okay, which leaves them 26 rye. So that's what they're consuming. So, Contente produces 32 genes and nothing else. Felicidad produces their comparative advantage 80 million rye and nothing else. Contente trades 18 genes for 54 rye, which leaves for consumption 14 genes and 54 rye. Felicidad imports those genes because they don't make any, and they export the 54 rye, and that leaves them 26 rye. Okay. Now it says, when the two countries did not specialize, the total production of genes was 23 million per month, and the total production of rye was 68 million per month. Because of specialization, it says the total production of genes has increased by. Well, how much did genes increase by, and how much did rye increase by? Okay, Contente produces 32 genes. They used to produce the whole world. Remember, this is what everybody produced, was 23. Up here, so let's go back. Here we are. 23. That's how many genes used to be produced in the whole world before these guys were trading. So the gain, the whole world is richer, right? There's more genes in the world. By how many? An increase of 9. How about Felicidad? Well, Felicidad specializes in rye, and they produce 80 rye. And how much rye was there in the world before that? There was 68. There was 68. So the increase is 80 minus 68. Now they give us this table, this thing. Okay, that's at the bottom of the problem. And you see the two countries, the two goods, and it tells us this is without trade. Now remember, before, when they didn't trade, this is what they chose, this is what they were producing. And they give us this again, but you remember it's, well, it's up here. Felicidad produced 15 million genes and 20 million rye. Contente produced 8 million genes and 48 million rye. Okay, that's where that came from. Okay, but they were nice enough to give it to us, and so that's already in the table. Okay. Now, with trade, how many genes is Felicidad producing with trade? And we already figured that out. Okay? We figured that out already. They're producing 0 genes because they're specializing in rye. And they're producing 80 rye. Okay, so a lot of this stuff we've already run into before. We just got to put it in the table. I know, it's a hassle, it's a pain, it's tedious. I told you. Not hard, but it's irritatingly tedious. I admit. I'm kind of irritated right now, just the same as you are. Okay, contente. What's their production of genes? Well, they're specializing in genes. They're producing all the genes. Remember that's 32 and 0 rye. Okay, so that's nothing new there. Well, remember it said that the genes producer, which is Contente, is exporting 18 genes to Felicidad. So the trade action for Felicidad is they're importing 18. And what are they doing with rye? Rye, they're actually exporting 54. Again, this is nothing new. We already talked about that. It's just that we're now sticking it in the table. So that's what Felicidad is doing. They're importing 18 genes and exporting 54 rye. What's Contente doing? Their trade action is to export 18. It's just the opposite, right? And they are importing 54 rye. And so what do they end up consuming? Okay, we already talked about that. That leaves, well, if Felicidad is producing 0 genes and importing 18, therefore they must be consuming 18. And if they're producing 80 rye and exporting 54, okay, we're refiguring this out. We already did this. We already did this earlier. I'm just, we're just kind of doing it again to review. So 80 minus 54. Anybody get out their fingers? Okay. If you're still awake. Okay, and we do the same thing for Contente. I'll spare you and just write it in. All right. So what are the gains from trade? What are they? Here's the bottom line. I mean, here's what we care about, right? Okay. How much more stuff do we get to consume? That's the bottom line. Well, then before trade, right? Well, before trade, Felicidad was consuming 15 genes. Now they're consuming 18. So the gains from trade are 18 minus 15, right? 3. Before trade, Felicidad was consuming 20 rye. Now they're consuming 26 rye. A gain from trade of 26 minus 20, or 6. Okay? Same over here with Contente. 14 minus 8 is their gain from trade for genes. 54 minus 48, their gains from trade from rye. Well, let's write in the numbers. Okay. Well, that does it. That was long and painful, almost a half hour's worth, guys. I am so sorry. But that's the economics of trade, and that is why we do it. This is why we do it. These numbers here, we're better off with it. That's why.